who is going to be in the final, the young man who won the European Championships 2 years ago. 2 years ago, he won by beating England in Berlin in Germany. And now he's going to play against either Harry Kane and Jude Bellingham, or he's going to play against Lionel Messi and Alvarez. And that looks like a great game. Many people want a repetition of the Euro final of 2 years ago, but you cannot write off Messi, can you? Congratulations to Spain. They did what nobody was expecting them to do, and they are in the World Cup final. So we take note of that. Let's come back to politics now.
And there they are. The squad is ready, lined up, ice cold, focused and prepared for national duty. Every bottle in position, every label shining with confidence. And here comes the selection. One bottle steps forward, picked from the squad, ready to deliver for Ghana. He takes the first sip. Oh yes, refreshingly hydrating. The whistle goes. The Black Stars are on the move. He breaks through the defense like flowing water. Beautiful control. He lines it up. He strikes. Goal! Ghana is awake. From the fridge to the field, Awake keeps you refreshed. Awake purified drinking water, one for life. Proudly supporting the National Cardiothoracic Center. This advert is FDA approved.
Mommy, good morning.
Good morning, my son. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Mom. How about you?
I'm fine.
Joe, I just saw your mom doing her usual morning routine. Like, it was just 2 weeks she underwent a major colon surgery.
Bro, see, my mom is doing perfectly fine, and we're all excited about it. It was minimally invasive surgery, and the recovery has been very fast.
Minimally? Hey! No, wait. What do you mean by that?
So they offered my mom a laparoscopic colon surgery. Laparoscopic colon surgery,
Hey.
which we accepted. It turned out it was equally safe, with a very fast recovery time, and the cost involved too was very, very reasonable. She was discharged 3 days after the surgery, and you can see her, she's on her feet again.
3 days?
Just 3 days, bro.
Mean Tuber Hospital, first Ghana colorectal center, aimed to serve a peculiar health need.
From the rich soils of Ghana, our farmers grow the finest ingredients. We clean, hand select, and carefully craft into bold, unforgettable flavors. And when you open our little bag of big taste, it's pure, bold, unforgettable flavor bursting in every bite. Enjoy the goodness, made with big care. This advert is FDA approved.
Finding my dream apartment in just 2 days was a breeze with 7terragh.com. Looking for your next home, the perfect piece of land, or the best commercial property for your business? Are you worried about sending money home for property and finding nothing when you return? Well, worry no more. 7terragh.com is just a platform to find prime lands, perfect properties, or vibrant real estate development at the click of a button. 7terragh.com is your go-to property listing platform that allows you to register, list, rent, buy or sell, and connect with correct agents. With our AI-powered smart search, personalized dashboards, verified agent connection, and interactive property maps, all your property needs have been made easier. Check us out on 7terragh.com or contact us on 0302-998-246 or 0561-032-252. 7terragh.com, powered by MNC Properties.
In my line of work, a confident smile is everything. Kel Charcoal Toothpaste keeps me on top of my game and ensures my smile is always radiant and bright.
With the tiring nature of my job, we spend several hours under the scorching sun. To keep our teeth white and our breath fresh all the time, we use none other than Kel Charcoal toothpaste. Kel Charcoal toothpaste. You're on a Kessie and then a kit one.
Samayo kendini, ehu behia, semecha sapapadia to amame manfo. Kel Charcoal's natural ingredients, eno bomb se ho ban, e mane swing, ne sanso mama hoto so e wo bedwam.
Kel Charcoal toothpaste. Choose Kel Charcoal toothpaste for anti-cavity, whiter teeth, and fresher breath all day. Available in 80 gram and 150 gram. Grab yours today.
Kel, happy smile. This advert is FDA approved.
This July, Ghana will host global downstream energy leaders, innovators, and experts at the Ghana International Petroleum Conference, GIPCON 2026, to collaborate, exchange insights, and develop strategies and groundbreaking innovations through strategic dialogues. The event, held under the auspices of the Minister of Energy and Green Transition, Honorable Dr. John Abdullah Junapo, is on the theme Building a Resilient Downstream, Policy, Innovation, and Investment for Growth. His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, President of the Republic of Ghana, is our distinguished guest of honor. Speakers for the event are Mr. Godwin Kujo Tamaglo Esquire, Chief Executive of NPA, Dr. Patrick Ofori, Chief Executive of Seaboard, Dr. Riverson Opon, Chief Executive of Comac, alongside other key captains of industry. Join us from the 16th to the 17th of July 2026 from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. each day at the Palms Convention Center, La Palm Royal Beach, Accra. We can't wait to host you.
Can he tee up someone in red?
Do not say! That's who goal is for. I be the real goat. Sam, what's the real goat?
Who is the goat? Ghana Jollof or Nigerian Jollof?
You are lying! Ghana Jollof!
We are talking about BET. Except be the goat, huh? My guy, he be the goat.
Though our choice of goats may differ in football, music, and jollof, Alomobitus always brings us together. Alomo, experience greatness in every moment.
Proudly produced by Casa Preco PLC. Drink responsibly. Not for sale to persons under 18 years. Not recommended for pregnant women and lactating mothers. Don't drink and drive. This advert is FDA approved.
Back home here, we have an important matter, and it's about the Miracle Abuaji arrest. It's interesting. I've looked at social media, and there are two main arguments on this matter. The first argument on the matter is that some people are saying that if somebody has misappropriated public funds, why don't you want him to be taken through the process? Why are you massing up at Yoko? Are you defending stealing? Is that what the MPP youth support base is about? Don't go to Yoko, wait and let Yoko finish their processes. Now, that's what some people are arguing they are making. There are others who are saying that, why do you have to arrest him so dramatically at the airport so that you create this unnecessary conversation in the news as if there's some instability somewhere one way or the other? And those who say that make the point that, in fact, Yoko has started already investigating this matter they talk about, and Miracles has appeared with them, and he has spoken with them, and so it's ongoing investigations, so that if you need him again, you can call him back. If you want to put a stop on him, you can tell him that bring your passport. You can do anything that's not dramatic. Now, why do you have to be dramatic about it? This is very interesting, and this is our editorial. Forgive us if the editorial gets too harsh, because it could get there. It's politics, it's passion, it's society, and it's important that we state what we have to state at the fourth estate of the realm. So let's take our editorial montage. We come back and we hear the story.
Ghana, we now have freedom. Ghana, land of freedom. Toils of the brave and the sweat of their labors. Toils of the brave which have brought results.
Welcome again to the show and to this all-important editorial. So what's the story? The MPP's mouthpiece and incoming communications director of the party, who has been communicating for the party since before the 2024 election and up until now, who has been the thorn in the flesh of the NDC. Without Miracles Abuaji, many of the cocoa crisis that the NDC faced would have been completely watered down. Miracles went into the cocoa farms and had people in the cocoa farms, and he spoke to the cocoa farmers directly, and the whole Ghana got to know the plight of cocoa farmers. He is a cocoa crashi by reason of standing with cocoa farmers. So that was something Miracles has been doing. And then he's also on the tangent of exposing the NDC here and there. But that is really his job. He is the formal spokesperson of the NPP, and he was also the spokesperson of the Mahamadou Bawumia campaign for the internal elections that re-elected Bawumia to become the NPP's flag bearer for the 2028 election. So Miracles is quite well known, and he is a thorn in the flesh of the NDC, whichever way you look at it. Then one day we heard that last Sunday, we heard that he had come from a trip abroad, and then he was arrested there at the airport, and all hell broke loose. As I speak to you now, thankfully, Miracles has been released. The bail condition has been met, but this is where the story begins. So let's take it from the Fourth Republic, okay? We came to the Fourth Republic in 1993, 7th of January, with an election in November 1992, coming from 10 or 11 years of a coup military junta led by Fly Lieutenant Rawlings. There was one-time arrest during the military infrastructure. The Kwesi Pratt Jr., I keep saying, says that there were 340-something people who went missing. People were killed indiscriminately because they were suspected to be opposed to the regime, etc. But Fly's Lieutenant Rawlings then metamorphosed into a civilian president. The period of 1993 up to 2000 was better than the period before. Of course, we have to say a big gratitude to the institutions like the Ghana Bar Association, like the Supreme Court of Ghana, very distinguished constitutional lawyers who kept pounding at the court and delivering our freedoms in some of the most important cases. MPP versus IGP, for instance, determined that we can have freedom of demonstration. MPP versus GBC determined that the state broadcaster will afford equal time to all political parties. J.H. Mensah and the Attorney General determined that a president who has won a second term must still submit his ministers to Parliament. All of these major constitutional cases, and the most biggest one of them was the 31st December case, in which the Supreme Court held that the NDC government cannot use state funds to celebrate the military coup of 31st December. So all of these things happened during the Rawlings era. And we have to give credit to Rawlings, shouldn't we? He permitted it. Well, he could have fought it and he would have lost the fight, but Ghana would have probably lost more. There will be people who would have been dead and all of that. But thanks to Rawlings and his principal advisors, Justice D.F. Annan, who was Speaker of Parliament, Obed Asamoah, who was Attorney General, all of these people prevailed on Rawlings to accept very bitter Supreme Court decisions against him. So that brought us to the year 2000 when John Kufuor became president. When Kufuor became president, there were some incidents like that. I refer, for instance, to the Chachu Chikata case. In the Chachu Chikata case, Mr. Chikata was being prosecuted for causing financial loss to the state, which was the new law in those days, causing financial loss to the state. Now the new one is causing fear and panic. Causing financial loss to the state was a law that was procured by the NDC majority parliament, which will be the second parliament of the Fourth Republic. Now, the causing financial loss to the state was used to prosecute Mr. Chikata, and people were unhappy that Mr. Chikata was, for instance, arrested in church on a Sunday. People were unhappy that Chikata had won a Supreme Court decision and the review overturned the decision, etc., etc. So the Chikata situation represented a kind of dark spot in the Kufuor jurisprudence at the time and the justice delivery system. Beyond that, all the people who were tried under the Kufuor administration, I refer to those who were tried under Quality Grade, for instance. I refer to Richard Kwame Pepra. Kwame Pepra, when he was tried under Quality Grade, was never incarcerated on any bail conditions of the sort. That never happened. Kwame Pepra was never incarcerated on any bail conditions or something like that. I used to go to Kwame Pepra's house in Labone as a reporter when he was on trial, and nobody incarcerated him. The only time they went to jail was upon a court decision, when the court decided that they found foul of the law after they had their day in court, their lawyers had spoken. It was only then that they went to jail. Kwame Pepra, unfortunately, Victor Selome, may he rest in peace, George Sipayanki, that very eloquent lawyer at the Ministry of Finance, where all went to jail. Dan Abudakpi, unfortunately, also went to jail. But in the process of the trial, nobody arrested them from their home and then incarcerated them without granting bail, etc. So that didn't happen, and that's a matter of public record. Okay, so the Kufuor era ends. Then we come to the Professor Mills era. Professor Mills era the only big story was about the expenditure that had occurred under Ghana at 50. So there was a commission of inquiry. The Ghana at 50 committee had been chaired by Charles Reku Brobe, that very distinguished engineer, who is still very happily with us. Dr. Brobe, happy to know that you are still with us. I hope that you are watching. And Brobe chaired the Ghana at 50 committee. Brobe and some of the people who worked on the Ghana at 50 committee were hauled before a committee of inquiry. Incidentally, the committee was led by Marietta Brew Apia Opong, who later became Attorney General under President Mahama. They were all successful at the committee. The committee hearings was broadcast live on television because Professor Mills was interested in transparency. And that happened, and it was okay. Nothing happened. Then came the President Mahama administration, the vice president who had suddenly on 24th July 2012 become president because of the unfortunate passing of Professor Mills. John Mahama held the country together that night. We were all at the Parliament House when he was sworn in. During the John Mahama period, there was nothing like that. It's understandable because John Mahama inherited the Mills administration. So that's understandable. So the first 4 years of John Mahama. Then came the very crucial 8 years of the Akufo-Addo administration. 8 years of Akufo-Addo. Now what happened? Several people were prosecuted. I still remember that the current Attorney General, Dominic Ayine, he was Deputy Attorney General. And the current Minister for Energy, John Jinapor, at that time he was a Deputy Minister for Power. And the Minister for Power, Kwabena Donko, they were all visited by police in some, difficult circumstances. It was like a raid of sorts. The police had gone to their homes early in the morning. On that morning, as a news reporter, at 7 o'clock, I was in Kwabena Donko's house at Spintex Road. And he told me what had happened. The police had come in there and they had taken hold of his laptop and all his mobile phones, and they took them away. They said they were going to search his emails to see what conversations he had with agents of a company called Ameri. Ameri was an energy company that had delivered some badges to Ghana, something like that. The Akufo-Addo people suspected that some corruption had occurred during the Ameri process. So, yes, they took the laptops. But they did not invite him to BNI and put him in the Yoko cells. They did not put him in BNI cells. They just took his laptop and his phones, which were later returned to him. The same situation happened in John Jinapor's house, unfortunately. He was visited by police in the morning. You can understand his children were about just waking up to go to school, and then they find policemen in their house, and they were quite brutal, and they said, bring this, bring that. So they took the laptops from John Jinapor as well. The same thing happened to Kwabena Donko. All three of them, Dominic Ayine, John Jinapor, and Kwabena Donko. But nobody invited them and incarcerated them with onerous bail conditions. That certainly didn't happen in the Akufo-Addo era. Subsequently, other people were prosecuted. Current Finance Minister Kaysel Ato-Forson was prosecuted. In the case of Ato-Forson, the court documents were actually sent to him in Parliament. Nobody even invited Ato-Forson to come in. The court documents were sent to him in Parliament, and they were all given self-recognizance bail. Collins Dauda on Sagleme. He was never incarcerated and said that you can't meet onerous bail conditions and so you have to be incarcerated. That never happened. The trial was allowed to proceed because, you see, no agency of state has the power to be incarcerating people. It doesn't work like that. No agency of state has the power to do that. They can investigate and then they have to go to court and allow the person's freedoms, if it has to be curtailed by a court of competent jurisdiction. Here in Ghana, over the last Fourth Republic, we have had a faith in our courts. If you read our book, the 77 Stories of the Fourth Republic, you will see that we attribute Ghana's sustainability to the work of the Supreme Court and the Superior Court of Judicature. That's how it's been. So everybody trusts the court in Ghana. I hope the trust is still there. But everyone trusts the court in Ghana. We all saw the drama around Kwabena Dubois. Now see what's happening in court. So in the Akufo-Addo 8 years, which is just the immediate past, nobody, no single person was invited and then incarcerated and kept in. The only example would be the NEC Deputy General Secretary at the time, Koko Anyidoho. Mr. Anyidoho had professed publicly that there was going to be a coup d'etat to remove Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo from government. And so the police felt that with that kind of menseria, Anyidoho needed to be kept within police custody. And what happened? The NDC supporters massed up, led by John Dramani Mahama, former president as he then was, Betty Mouldy-Drisu, former attorney general as she then was. They went to the CID. The CID met them, spoke nicely, and handed over Koko Anyidoho to them. on the promise that Mr. Alido was going to be very well behaved. That's what happened. Nobody who was on trial was given onerous bail terms, bring this, bring that, you can't bring it, and then we keep you in. Everyone respected the national constitution's 48-hour threshold for people to be dealt with and then to be released for the court to continue its process. So that's really what happened. What is happening now is so dangerous. And it's okay for people to be happy about it. And it's okay. I saw some journalists, I really respect, a lady who works abroad now, posting something on social media, very excited that Miracle Sabuaji had been arrested because she's also the communicator. She was happy that Miracle Sabuaji has been arrested. I think that's crass behavior. It just shows that people have very low IQ. You can't be a journalist and be happy that somebody has been arrested and given onerous bail conditions. But anyway, this is Ghana and this is the world, this is society. And so people are different. But we have to structure this thing in such a way that it does not affect anybody negatively. Read social media these days, and you will see some people writing saying that, well, if this is what is going to happen, then people should be ready. Next time another government is in power, they'll be asking for the cross of Jesus Christ from Calvary before people will be given bail. They'll be asking for the thorns that was on Jesus's head before people will be given bail. It sounds funny, but the way things are going, that could happen. We don't want a retaliatory politics in our Fourth Republic. We have long moved away from such wanton abuse of human rights and such massive abuse of power. If you look at the 1992 Constitution, the most powerful person is the president. And you look at Article 58, 5.8 of the Constitution, and it says that the executive authority of Ghana shall vest in the president. But there's a caveat. It said that executive authority shall be exercised in accordance with the provisions of the 1992 Constitution. So even the president with all his powers, he has limits to the provisions of the 1992 Constitution. Iyoko may arrest somebody on discretion, but if you go to Article 296 of the Constitution, you will find that discretion itself is limited. The Constitution prescribes that discretion should not be capricious, it should not be personal, and all of that. And these things are happening. You arrest Miracle Sabuaji and you keep him in for 3 days and give him some onerous bail conditions, 50 million and all of that. When you are not the court, you cannot make a final determination over whether he is guilty of the offenses you are thinking about or not. The forum that can make that conclusion is the court. And yes, you don't get the court involved, and as an investigative body, you do these things, you are in clear violation of Article 296. Now, when the Constitution says that the president is limited by the provisions of the Constitution in exercise of his executive authority, what that means is that the president may exercise his discretion, but that discretion is also very limited to the provisions of the Constitution. And when we say the provisions of the Constitution, we actually mean the letter of the Constitution and the spirit of the Constitution. What is happening these days is in clear violation of both the letter and the spirit of the 1992 Constitution. And we can't sit back and say nothing about it because it will come and hunt everyone. People we know, people we love, people we don't know, who are all Ghanaians. Why are we doing this to ourselves? The matter gets very serious, viewers, when now you consider that two people sitting in John Dramani Mohammed's cabinet, Idrisu Haruna, one of them who is a minister for education. Idrisu Haruna is a seasoned politician these days. Idrisu Haruna is a guy who is about mid to late 50s. He's been doing politics from the time he was 30, late 20s, up until today. He's a member of parliament. He was former majority leader. Now, Idrisu Haruna has had cause to complain about these bail things that are happening. And he spoke publicly about it. See this video, viewers. See the video of Haruna Idrisu complaining about onerous bail conditions that members of his government are dishing out to the opponents of the politics. Have a look at this video.
In Ghana today, we have seen excesses from the police, excesses from the court, excesses from Iyoko, denying persons bail and using bail as punishment for accused person. That is not law. It is tried knowledge and tried law that don't deny an accused person bail or ask an accused person to pay excessively as a punishment to the accused person if you uphold the right to a fair trial and uphold the right to innocence at trial, that every person is presumed innocent. So I expect that in Ghana today, we must end the high-handedness and excessiveness in matters relating to bail and his denial and his charges.
So you saw the video. It's not just Idrisu Haruna, but this other video I'm going to show you is very, very critical and very important. The reason why it's important is that the Minister for Interior, who has control over all of these state agencies within the realm of Ghana, within the jurisdiction of Ghana, the Minister for Interior has control over them. This Minister for Interior is complaining. That means that the matter we are dealing with is more serious. It means there are people who are below the authority of the Minister for Interior who are doing this, arrest people and incarcerate them and give them onerous bail conditions, the heads of these institutions of investigation and all of that. They all work below the Interior Minister. And this is what they are doing. It means that somebody is personalizing these things. It's a personal agenda. People are trying to satisfy themselves. They are on their very personal thing, chasing people they don't like and using their authority as a Yoko boss or whatever to fight people they don't like or they have some problem with, which is outside the realm of work, outside the realm of politics. As human beings, we can have problems with each other. But the framers of the law always say that you cannot bring your personal vendetta into these things, because if you do that, and if that's what we've been doing, if America was doing that for 250 years, there'll be no democracy at all, because everyone comes and is able to vent his personal vendetta by using the authority of state, which belongs to all Ghanaians, and give it to some people because they won election to run for 4 years or 8 years or 12 years or whatever it is. If you take that authority and you do these things, then there could be repercussions. Here is the Minister for Interior complaining in Parliament to the Speaker of Parliament that he is very worried about these bail conditions that are being used to harass people, particularly political opponents all over. Listen to Mubarak Muntaka, who is the Minister for Interior. Listen.
I've been working with the Minister of Justice and Attorney General in the constitutional amendment that is currently ongoing, that we should make remand very restrictive, because currently it is massively abused. With the least provocation, they say they remanded somebody. You go to police, they remand people anyhow. Sometimes they give terrible bail conditions which people are not able to meet. We want to take the opportunity in this constitutional amendment to restrict this unnecessary remand. I'm sure if we are able to get these three things working together, it is going to help us to decongest our prisons and also ourselves and make life a little more better.
So that was the video of Mubarak Muntaka, the Interior Minister, who finds himself helpless because institutions under him are doing something that is not from him. And I believe that he wanted Parliament to know that he's a law-abiding citizen and these things that are happening are not coming from him. That creates a very, very serious problem. It creates a very, very serious problem here. It's not good at all. It creates a real difficulty, a very serious problem. The Interior Minister has lost control. He's telling Parliament that let's pass laws. So why are we doing this? Who is in charge? What is happening? Even if it's Richard Jakpa in charge, Richard Jakpa will know that when he was being prosecuted, nothing of the sort was done. He was allowed to go anywhere he wants to go, including visiting Supreme Court judges and meeting people. Nobody incarcerated him and asked him to bring onerous bail conditions. That was not done in the Akufo-Addo era. And we have moved this democracy now to the 7th and 8th Parliament. Why is somebody taking us back? And why do I say somebody is taking us back? They are taking us back because if you look critically, a government changes, it could be retaliation. We all hope that there will be no retaliation so that we can move forward. But human beings are human beings, and when pain is in people and they have power, you can't stop that. So we should stop these things, because today is X, tomorrow is Y. Let us build a democracy that's a competition of ideas, and let's compete with ideas so that the better idea wins, so that Ghana is successful for it. Why are we doing these things? You go and catch Miracles Aboagye, and then you want to show him where power lies. Don't you know that tomorrow Miracles Aboagye may have power? Miracles Aboagye could be Interior Minister tomorrow. Miracles Aboagye could be the head of Yoko tomorrow. Miracles Aboagye could be the head of BNI tomorrow. It's political appointment that is appointed by the person who Ghanaians have entrusted the government with. And if the person Ghanaians have entrusted the government with so trust Miracles Aboagye, and then he wants to make him Yoko boss. Should Miracles go there and start looking for the people who arrested me at the airport because they all work for the government and they will still be working for the government by the time the next government comes? And then tells them that I'll teach you a lesson, and then teaches him a lesson to affect the person's family, children, and all of that. Children in Ghana, 7 years, 8 years, they shouldn't have those problems that their father is in a political situation, and that if somebody has stolen money, by all means prosecute. Akufo-Addo did that. Akufo-Addo won some of the prosecutions. He lost some of the prosecutions. Kufuor won some of the prosecutions. He lost some of the prosecutions. But that is the way it goes in a democracy. The government can prosecute, but it's the courts that makes the ultimate decision. So people must understand that the courts are sacrosanct, and we have to hold them in that esteem and stop giving the court power to state institutions because of personal vendetta, and then they go and incarcerate this person, incarcerate that person. That's very wrong. Some people may feel they have power, so they don't want to listen. But these are the important lessons of democracy. And we are not alone on this matter. As I've showed you, we are with at least 2 cabinet ministers sitting in John Mohammed's cabinet who have decided to voice out. There may be other cabinet ministers in John Mohammed's cabinet who don't want to voice out, but they think the same way. And I can assure you that there are many lawyers who belong to NDC who think the same way. So those bad nuts that are giving the government and our democracy a bad name should be held accountable, and they will be held accountable, and they should be responsible for the things that they are doing. It's very bad. We hope that we will not have this again, as many people are talking, as the Interior Minister has gone to Parliament to speak, as the Education Minister has spoken. We hope that these things will end. It is very, very crucial that these things end. This is our editorial in support of free speech, in support of constitutionalism, in support of society, and in support of democracy.
Ghana, we now have freedom. Ghana, land of freedom, toils of the brave and the sweat of their labors, toils of the brave which have brought results.
And there they are. The squad is ready, lined up, ice cold, focused and prepared for national duty. Every bottle in position, every label shining with confidence. And here comes the selection. One bottle steps forward, picked from the squad, ready to deliver for Ghana. He takes the first sip. Oh yes, refreshingly hydrating. The whistle goes. The Black Stars are on the move. He breaks through the defense like flowing water. Beautiful control. He lines it up. He strikes. Goal! Ghana is awake. From the fridge to the field, Awake keeps you refreshed. Awake purified drinking water, one for life. Proudly supporting the National Cardiothoracic Center. This advert is FDA approved.
Looking for the ultimate oil city getaway? Welcome to the Groove Esipon Beach Resort, where luxury meets adventure. Host your meetings and events in our fully equipped conference facility. Relax our sparkling pool, unwind in cozy rooms, satisfy your cravings at our scenic restaurant, and enjoy fun-packed recreational activities and a walk through our charming menus. Whether it's business, pleasure, or pure escape, the Groove is your perfect destination.
Can he tee up someone in red?
I be the real goat, Chairman.
Who is the goat? Ghana Jollof or Nigerian Jollof?
You are lying! Ghana Jollof!
We are talking about beat. Let's be the goat, huh? My guy, him be the goat.
Though our choice of goats may differ in football, music, and jollof, Alomo Bitters always brings us together. Alomo, experience greatness in every moment.
Proudly produced by Casa Preco PLC. Drink responsibly. Not for sale to persons under 18 years. Not recommended for pregnant women and lactating mothers. Don't drink and drive. This advert is FDA approved.
Well, viewers, thank you very much for continuing to stay with us. So now we had this interview that's very interesting. We interviewed a South African professor about nearly a year ago in the studio. He's a South African law professor. Now he told us a bit about what's happening in South Africa, and because some of the things he predicted are happening, we'd like to show you this interview today. We talk about xenophobia, etc. Now in South Africa today, there's something interesting happening in the government. The government of Cyril Ramaphosa, the president, has appointed into his government many of the members of the DA party. The DA party is the white party. So you have some white people. I believe that his cabinet is currently populated by more white people. And then people are talking about it. In this interview, you're going to understand everything about South Africa, about xenophobia and all of that. It's very, very interesting. Have a look at this interview. This is Good Evening Ghana and it's live. Thank you, Professor Hines, for your time, and thank you for being in Ghana. What are you doing in Ghana, by the way?
I'm here as a Fulbright scholar at the University of Ghana at Legon Law School.
What are you teaching them?
I'm working with colleagues here teaching constitutional law.
South Africa and apartheid. South Africa and apartheid, the names go together. Since 1994, when the first democratic election under universal adult suffrage occurred, it was won by the African National Congress and Nelson Mandela. We have now gone 2 decades, nearly 3 decades.
3 decades.
3 decades of that.
3 decades.
Has democracy delivered dividends to the South African black, to the South African black?
Well, yes, to all South Africans, which the majority are black. It's delivered peace. It's delivered a democracy, it's delivered dignity, but it has not delivered economically for the vast majority. And that is a serious problem. So we've overcome a lot of the issues of apartheid, but we have not overcome the legacies of apartheid. Land reform, the need for redistribution, the need for economic development for the African majority has not been as effective as it should have been.
If the ultimate African politician, Nelson Mandela, was not able to redistribute land, this is the fiery Mandela from the 60s, who was very intent on not equalization, but equitable distribution of South African resources. Mandela has been very intent on that. And in the time of Mandela, he had absolute power in terms of the ballot box. He was winning significantly. Mandela at that time also had, in the beginning, Oliver Tambo, who was still alive, all those who came back, Thabo Mbeki, and that what we call the full team of the ANC. If that group was not able to deliver land reform, does land reform have a future in South Africa?
It has to have a future. At the time, the difficulty was even though the political power had clearly shifted, the economic power had not. It reminds me of Nkrumah's position of first the political kingdom and then the economic. And the difficulty in South Africa at the time was, given the global context, given the South African political context, the military forces had not shifted, the military power had not shifted, and so Mandela was faced with trying to bring a country together that was still completely divided. And he didn't have the power to insist on immediate land reform. So what we began with was a process of land restitution, because millions of South Africans had their land taken away from them under apartheid. They were dispossessed. What was not addressed was the vast dispossession that had taken place before 1913, the process of colonization. And so the two things have to happen, not just restitution, but also land redistribution and land reform.
It's taken 30 years for that.
30 years.
Still hasn't happened.
Not nearly as much as it has to. That is correct. And I think that one of the difficulties is that economically, the country has not been able to move. I also think politically, the failure of the ANC to address this issue directly. It's only a few months ago when finally Ramaphosa signed the new Expropriation Act. This is an Expropriation Act that's just been signed that was should have been done immediately after the election and after the 1996 Constitution was adopted. That Constitution adopted the exact same parameters for reform, for redistribution, that the present Expropriation Act has adopted. 30 years it took to sign the statute to make the Constitution effective. And why was that? Well, the political pressures were there all along. And what did we see happen? He signs it now, and immediately he's getting international pushback.
International pushback from signing the agreement,
signing the Expropriation
Act to begin the process of redistribution of land?
Yeah, well, not to begin the process, but just to make sure that it's facilitated, that it can go more effectively.
But who is pushing back?
Well, the President of the United States signed an executive order saying that because South Africa signed this, they'll take away all aid from South Africa.
Why doesn't he want to sign? What is his concern about it?
Oh, he's been convinced by the right-wing white groups in South Africa that somehow they are being dispossessed. They have a claim of white genocide. There's no evidence, no facts that support this at all. And yet the Trump administration has adopted this position.
Yeah, but the National Party is in government for the first time.
The National Party.
Are they not in alliance with the African National Congress?
No, the National Party is history. It's
okay,
the Democratic Alliance,
which is an offshoot of the National Party, isn't it?
No, it was its own party originally, and it transformed itself from what was originally the Progressive Federal Party, then became the Democratic Party, then the Democratic Alliance, and part of the National Party collapsed into it, its support base. The National Party officially dissolved itself into the ANC.
Yes. It dissolved itself into the ANC?
Yes, officially.
In 94?
No. I think it was 2007.
But what we have in South Africa now is a coalition of a sort of a black ANC and a white alliance. Is that not correct?
They wouldn't like to frame it that way, the DA, because they do have some black membership, but effectively that is the way it politically is.
Doesn't the white business and economic community feel more comfortable that they now have a say at the seat of the cabinet table?
They possibly do, in which case they should do the kind of investment in the country that will enable the country to progress.
Has investment reduced into South Africa?
Investment has not kept up at all over these 30 years.
Where has the investment gone to? Other countries?
A lot of South African capital has gone abroad.
Abroad?
That's right.
To which countries?
Well, if you think of the big companies like Anglo-American, etc., they transferred themselves to the United Kingdom, they transferred themselves out of South Africa. There's been enormous capital flight over the years.
Just for our viewers who may not understand the South African demographics, when we say white South African, is that man a British or is it Dutch?
Well, it's both, and it's German, and it's all sorts of white Europeans that came right from 1652 over the years. Today, it's about 7% of the population, which is a very small minority.
But they control economic power.
They still have the concentrated. South Africa's economy has been incredibly concentrated, and so they still have enormous economic power.
What do you pretend will happen in South Africa, say, 25 years from now?
Well, I'm hoping in 25 years from now, you'll have a much more equitable society.
Is it possible?
I don't know how we get there. Of course it's possible. It has to be possible, otherwise it's not going to be functional.
I see, that's interesting. What's your own political philosophy, given that you support ANC as a European origin, you supported the African National Congress. It reminds all of us of Walter Sisulu, but why did you do that?
Well, I was a young student leader at what was then the University of Natal, KwaZulu-Natal, back in the middle of 1976, at the time of the student uprising in 1976. And I could see what was happening.
When you say student uprising, do you mean the Soweto massacre?
The Soweto uprising, the massacre that happened in Soweto happened across the country, not just in Soweto. And I became very much committed to changing that system. And as a result, I was elected president of the South African Students' Press Union and was involved in the student press. I was a young student journalist. And in 1979, I had to go on the run. and I ended up in Botswana. And so I then set up a news agency in Botswana that was working to bring information out of South Africa, and I became part of the ANC underground and worked politically and in the news to get information out to support the anti-apartheid struggle.
In this 76 episode, did you meet Winnie Mandela?
No, I did. I met her many years later when I returned to South Africa. I did not meet her.
How did your parents feel about that?
My parents are interesting because, of course, my background's actually a little more mixed. My mother's family came from Mauritius. My father was a German who came in '53 to South Africa, and surprised, he was a social democrat, which I still am. And in fact, what happened was he found himself increasingly unhappy with what was happening in South Africa, and so he was given his own. Growing up in Nazi Germany, he didn't want to do anything. He got very upset when I started becoming active. He just thought you should be neutral, you shouldn't do anything, because he was too scared. So he was relieved when I went into exile because he thought I was safe.
How did you live in Botswana?
He didn't understand.
As a young man, what did you do? Did you have enough money to pay for a rent and to manage your newspaper in Botswana? How did you do it?
Well, we got international support. We were effectively like an NGO. We got support from the Swedish anti-apartheid movement, from the Norwegians, from others, from the Dutch, and we set up this news agency in Botswana. I arrived when Seretse Khama was still president in June 1979. He died shortly thereafter. I went to his funeral. So for me, being in Africa was extraordinary. And I also then became part of the African National Congress that was present. But of course, in Botswana, the ANC was effectively underground. It was pressure from South Africa. And I stayed there, and by 1985, the Botswana authorities were telling me that I was in danger and they wanted me to move. And I went to visit my person who's now my wife, who in fact grew up in Ghana. We'll talk about that, and in part. And I went, and just within days of me arriving in the United States, where she was studying at Berkeley, there was a military raid into Botswana, and they attacked the news agency. They destroyed the news agency, and they announced proudly the next day that they'd killed me. So
they announced that they had killed you?
Yes, right. At a news conference, the generals in Pretoria. And so I couldn't go back to Botswana. That was over. And
so where did you go?
Well, I was at that moment in Berkeley, California, visiting the woman.
Oh, all the way?
Well, I'd gone to visit.
So you went very far away?
I was far away to visit, and so I stayed there.
Okay, you remained there?
Got married.
Okay.
To my wife. We got married, I stayed there, and that's when I went to law school, because I hadn't been a lawyer until then.
I see. So Berkeley? UCLA Berkeley is where you studied?
No, I went to law school at what was then called Hastings College of the Law, now called the University of California, San Francisco Law.
So you were a member of the ANC?
Correct.
In Nkonto Wesizwe as well?
That's correct.
That's the first organization that created the problem, and Mandela went to jail, didn't he, because of his activities with Nkonto?
He was the commander-in-chief. He was
and
the first
it was alleged against Mandela in the courts, in the trial, that he had abducted and kidnapped and all those kinds
not
of
Mandela. No.
Well, the Nkonto, not him, but
no,
but
Nkonto at the time. There was never any allegations of abduction against Nkonto. It was sabotage and military activity.
Yes, but
what you're talking about abduction and that was under Winnie Mandela. That was the case against Winnie much later.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
But what was the case against Nelson, for which he went to jail for life?
It was that he was armed insurrection against the regime.
Under Nkonto? Or just by himself?
He created Umkhonto Wesizwe.
Nelson Mandela.
He was one of the people who created Umkhonto Wesizwe. That's correct.
And
he was part of what was called the High Command.
Yes, human rights activists became quite worried that even after getting out of jail and becoming president, Nelson Mandela continued to defend the ethos of Nkonto and thought they were necessary for the time.
Correct.
But Nkonto was a violent organization, wasn't it?
I don't know what you mean by a violent organization. It was an armed resistance group which believed that the only way to defend the people of South Africa against the oppression of the apartheid regime was with armed resistance. And what's interesting is that very difficult, the ANC did not adopt armed struggle willy-nilly. Neither did Mandela. That was a process where they repeatedly called on the government of the apartheid regime to negotiate. And at the point when they refused to negotiate, after the Sharpeville massacre, in which they killed officially 69 people, it turns out now it was probably many more, as a result of that, the ANC called for a national conference, constitutional conference to negotiate the future. The regime's response was to ban the ANC, the Pan-Africanist Congress, and so black South Africa had no opportunity to engage politically. This was a moment, if you remember, when Africa was in a process of decolonization. Ghana had just got independence in 1957, and this was 1960, 3 years later. And the option that was being put on the table was that black South Africa could not get independence. It was in that context that eventually Mandela says there's no better option but to fight. And that's when they adopted armed struggle. What's interesting, the first period of armed struggle, they deliberately did not attack anybody, persons. They only attacked electrical power stations, power communications, things like that, that were government buildings that were empty at night, because they were trying to force the regime into negotiations. Only after that was all suppressed did they actually turn to struggle. But what they never did, and which they so easily could have done, they could have put bombs in all-white theatres, all-white schools, etc. They never ever did that. So the framing of Umkhonto we Sizwe, there's a history there.
You sound like counsel for Umkhonto we Sizwe now. You sound like counsel for Umkhonto.
And why would I not be? Umkhonto we Sizwe was...
Let me explain to you why.
...was part of a liberation movement against apartheid.
The Ghanaian political elite were heavily divided on South Africa because in 1969, the Prime Minister of Ghana then, his name is Busia. He had the Foreign Minister whose name is Victor Owusu. And they, at the United African Union, strenuously argued Ghana's position that the only way for South Africa to get peace was through negotiation.
Right.
The government of Ghana was heavily attacked for not recognizing the lopsided power situation in South Africa and calling for negotiation. I'm guessing it's coming out, that came out of what you're saying, that they had been banned and so there was no room for negotiation. But then when in 1994-93 it came out, the supporters of this Prime Minister, who had by then passed, said to the world that we told you so, that if you had listened to us in 1969 to negotiate, perhaps South Africa's independence would have come in the 70s. But you said you won't negotiate, you will fight. And you fought.
Who said they wouldn't negotiate?
No, when Ghana said, when the Ghanaian foreign policy said, South Africa is about negotiation, the rest of Africa, who were all in you know,
the Organization of African
recently, Sam Nujoma has passed, so we can talk about it. SWAPO was very active in those days. The activities
ZANU and ZAPU in Zimbabwe, Frelimo in Mozambique,
Frelimo and at
MPLA,
that time Renamo was fighting.
No, Renamo was later. That was after independence.
Frelimo and Renamo.
Frelimo was fighting against Portuguese for independence of Mozambique. Renamo didn't exist. Renamo was only created after the independence.
In which year?
Renamo was created in 83, 84.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the conversations continued throughout the 70s. And this conversation I'm talking about is the mid-80s, when there was total chaos. Zimbabwe had just become independent in 1980 anyway.
Correct.
But by 1985, there was a lot of instability in the region. And at that time, there was a lot of armed struggles around, as you mentioned, SWAPO, this, that, all of them. And Robert Mugabe was very fiery in those days.
Sure.
It was unthinkable in that context to ask the African National Congress to negotiate, which is the position that Ghana's foreign policy had taken much earlier.
Yeah, but what's interesting, in 1985 was in fact the very early moments when the ANC at a conference in Zambia actually put in its conference resolutions that negotiations had to happen.
But that's the point I'm making, that the Ghanaian authorities, who had said this in 1969 and were ignored, came back in the 80s to say that this is what we told you about, and this is the only way to get independence for South Africa.
But the ANC was for negotiations all along.
Did it look like?
But they had to be at the table. How do you get people to the table to negotiate?
But how do you go
the regime was not negotiating.
Okay, but how do you go to the table when you set up Umkhonto? Nobody's going to negotiate with you when you set up Nkonto.
In fact, that's exactly why they came to the table in the end. It was because there was a struggle on the ground and the people were fighting, and so they had to come to a table. That's exactly why you get to a table, is when you have forces from both sides. If one side says, we're not going to do anything, we want to come to the table, the other side says, why?
Are you a left-wing thinker?
I don't know what you mean by left-wing thinker. I'm a constitutional lawyer. So first of all, the contradiction between constitutional lawyer and what you're implying as a left-wing thinker. I wish I was a left-wing thinker. Maybe that would help. I'm a social democrat in terms of my perspective on the world. I think that there should be redistribution. I've published on the need for a wealth tax in this world.
Wealth tax?
A wealth
That's
tax,
clearly left-wing.
Both in South Africa and in the United States.
That's very left-wing.
Left-wing? It's a redistribution of wealth. It's to make sure, so think about it this way. Up to the 1980 in the United States, when you earned above a certain amount, the rate of tax went up to nearly 90%.
In the 80s?
Up to 1980. It was Reagan coming in that changed that.
I was trying to look at the regime.
Was
so you're talking about Jimmy Carter then?
No,
76 to 80?
No, from 1945. I'm talking about a period.
Oh, you mean even with Nixon?
It was right through that period. There was
when Nixon was president, he allowed wealth tax?
It wasn't. It was the tax rate that was a highly progressive tax rate.
Oh yes, that's typically the same for most tax.
Which kept a much more even society.
So that the rich pay more. The rich pay more.
The rich pay more above a certain amount. They don't pay more for the same amount.
So that less.
So if you earn
$1,000,
if you earn $1,000, we both pay the same amount on that $1,000. We pay the same tax rate. But if I earn 5,000 and you own 7,000, then I'm over my 1,000, maybe to 2,000. I will pay a slightly higher rate. But on that last 1,000, I'll pay a much higher rate. That's a progressive tax rate. That's not unusual.
And you support that system?
Yes.
And you don't think
I think it's essential in order to actually make sure that people get a fair shake. They get good education, good opportunity.
But why are you making it a disincentive for people to earn more money?
It's not a disincentive.
It would appear so.
From my perspective, I don't think it's a disincentive. Because unless you have the capacity.
If I'm earning $8,000 and my tax will be $1,000, but if I earn $10,000, my tax will be $4,000. I'd like to remain at $8,000.
But you'll still only earn $8,000 anyway.
Well, if I earn $8,000, I pay $1,000, I have $7,000 back home.
Yeah.
If I earn $10,000, I pay $4,000, I have $6,000.
No, that's not correct. Because what happens is you only pay more on that top amount. You still earn up to that 8,000, and you'll earn more than the 8,000. You just pay a higher amount on the above 8,000. That's a progressive tax rate. You're mischaracterizing it when you suggest that in fact you're going to earn less.
Because I'm a right-wing thinker, so forgive my bias. but fair enough. Is that the system that operates in South Africa today? The tax system? Progressive?
They have a progressive tax system. It doesn't go to those rates at all. It could, but it does not.
I see. So how is Mandela seen these days in South Africa?
It depends on who you're speaking to. I would like to think that the vast majority still see that he was the person who brought liberation to the country, brought democracy, that he was not at all vengeful, that he believed in reconciliation for the country. But I think that there is a younger, it's many of my colleagues, young law professors in South Africa who are good colleagues of mine, black law professors, who are quite critical. They don't think it went far enough. They think, and what I often say to them is, where was the power in 1994?
For Mandela to do something?
Yeah. How could Mandela have done more?
He was president of the country. He won a landslide victory.
Yes, but actually he did not. He was denied the 2/3. But still,
now that's the landslide.
The ANC,
60%.
Oh, they had a fantastic. Yes, the ANC got a landslide. But that doesn't, having a landslide in an election doesn't give you power. It gives you authority. It gives you the ability to make arguments. It doesn't give you power in this world.
That's an interesting conversation.
Right. Power in this world.
Authority and power are different.
That's correct.
What, power is money? And authority is politics.
Power is tied to resources. It's tied to the ability to get people together, to bring people together. And that's precisely what Mandela then worked to do. But 94 itself, you still had a military, a very strong South African military. The threat of a possible coup d'etat was not off the table. And so those were the concerns that Mandela had to address.
I thought Mandela had absolute control of the South African Defence Forces.
But who was the South African Defence Force at the time?
The white.
It was still the old regime Defence Force. The numbers of people from Umkhonto we Sizwe, for instance, who integrated into that force were small.
Insignificant.
Compared in numbers.
Well, the phenomenon of those who say that Mandela may have failed, and I don't subscribe to. I think Mandela is a great African hero. But those who say Mandela may have failed say that it's a no-brainer. Just look at the phenomenon of Julius Malema. That should tell you Mandela failed. Do you agree with that? If you look at the rise of Malema, breaking out of the African National Congress, an effective youth leader, challenging the African National Congress, taking seats from the African National Congress, being very abusive in parliament to the African National Congress, that if Mandela had succeeded, this wouldn't have happened. Now, during the funeral ceremony of Winnie Mandela, we all remember the speech that Julius Malema gave, and he tore the ANC into shreds. Is that sufficient reflection of Mandela's failure?
I don't think it's a Mandela failure. I think it's success that we can have that kind of democracy, that Malema can say the things he can say. And in fact, in the last election, he lost support. So Malema has not succeeded at all. But he's been having to contest in elections. He's been having to contest in a democratic process. A media that can still expose his corruption. A media that can still engage. That's the success of Mandela. The success of Mandela is the 1996 Constitution.
So the success of Mandela should be looked at in the plurality and the establishment of democratic principles within the South African context.
I think that's
including
correct.
Julius Malema attacking Mandela's party and accusing them of being undemocratic.
Correct.
All that is part of Mandela's success. I think that's an interesting argument.
I think that's the way to see it.
But it will also
in a way, it's that notion that, in fact, it's the constitutionalism that Mandela embraced that has been the success. Now, I say that as a constitutional lawyer, of course. But the fact is that constitutionalism that has enabled the country to address the difficulties that it has. Some will argue, of course, it slowed down the possibility to do a mass redistribution. That's Malema's
constitutionalism,
right? It should have nationalized the country. Now, you argue I'm a left-wing thinker, I should want to nationalize everything. But it's quite clearly not the way to go, right? We can look at it and see that to do that without dealing with the kind of institutional structures you need to ensure that you don't have corruption that destroys the country, to ensure that you don't have the mass flight of capital that would destroy the country, that you needed some kind of negotiated outcome, which is what Mandela managed. So the Constitution sets in place the institutions to try and address this. Now, the threat is not Malema. The threat to the South African constitutionalism, in fact, came from within the ANC with Zuma's rise to power.
That's the point I was going to come to.
Because that starts
How does the ANC feel itself successful when it began?
I never said the ANC was successful. I said Mandela was successful.
Yes, I'm coming to a question. Those who feel that the ANC has been the bulwark and the ANC has been the stabilizing factor, the ANC has been the catalyst from a potentially imploding South Africa. There are those who think without the ANC, South Africa would have imploded.
I think that's right.
You agree with that,
yes.
don't you? Okay, so how does this ANC that has chopped this potential success produced Nelson Mandela, produced Thabo Mbeki, also produced Jacob Zuma, about whom Julius Malema had a lot to say relating to corruption, about whom institutions of state has something to say relating to corruption. Even Cyril Ramaphosa, the current president, has had a bit of brush in terms of newspapers publishing corruption allegations against him, etc., etc. How does the ANC come from this great party that was looking for equality and equity in South Africa, led by the ultimate Nelson Mandela, now come to tell a story about corruption to the extent that his youth leader is now accusing the leaders of corruption? That surely should suggest that the African National Congress failed.
So it's interesting the way you frame it in terms of success or failure. One has to think about a party is not one thing. It transforms over time, like every other human character. And what you see in that context is a party that was always a broad church, right? A broad church to bring together people against apartheid. So from within that party, you had very, very different elements all along. Zuma was there all along, right? He was in exile. He was he was in Robben Island.
But he wasn't accused of corruption all along.
No, because he wasn't necessarily engaged in corruption. There wasn't resources in that context. But once he gets the opportunity back inside the country, he has all sorts of pressures. Everybody wants to be middle class. There's a lot of resources that are needed. What kind of ability does he have to earn to gain those resources? And so what does he do? He starts engaging in using his political power to get access to resources. This is not an unknown thing anywhere in the world, not just South Africa.
You make an important point.
But he becomes very corrupt.
You talk about this Zuma example. You just said something that's interesting. Many people haven't thought about it. You talk about ability to participate in the economic situation.
That's right.
I'm looking at it broader in the African context. So is that the problem we really have, in that we have politicians who lack the ability and capability to participate in the economics, and therefore they use their political power to attain middle class status, and that may be the basis of the corruption in politics. Is that correct?
I think that you're going in the right direction, but I would push you a little bit. And the way I would push you is this way, is that if you think about it, the private sector is a source of resources for wealth generation. Well, where's the private sector been in Africa? The private sector has been dominated from the outside.
Yeah.
There's very little private sector. In South Africa, it's dominated by the white minority. That's the private sector. How do most people get a job in this world? And I'm talking about even in the United States. Most people get their first job through a family connection. Through somebody they know. Yes.
Yeah.
Even in the United States.
Yes.
Well, if you don't have that access to the private sector, what access do you have? Your access in a democratic system is to politics. And so politics becomes a way for you to go forward. And that's very problematic.
In economics.
For economically, it's a way to become your middle class. Or a job with the state, a job with government. And then you rely on the politicians to get you that job.
Why should a job in government be more attractive to a young man than a job in the private sector? That seems to where we are now.
Because he can't get the job in the private sector.
Because of capability.
It would be more attractive to be in the private sector. But if the private sector is so small, or it's dominated by others who you don't know, who you don't have access to, who don't recruit you, then where are you going to go? You go to the people you know.
Politics.
You go to your family. You go to your community. You go to your connections that will get you ahead. So yes, I think you're absolutely right that the difficulty is without a private sector that will bring in an African society that can develop and become wealthy, if you leave it, if everything has to be done through the state, then that becomes the grounds that corruption grows in, that develops. And the only private sector then that emerges is companies that the state helps to create and feed state money to. That's not economic development in terms of the kind of capitalist notion of economic development.
I agree with that.
So that's
interesting. So let's talk about constitutional law right now and political systems. Why did South Africa adopt the proportional representation system?
Well, that's actually a really interesting and important question. What happens in 1990 in those negotiations? When we were talking about, and I was working as the researcher for the head of the ANC Constitutional Committee.
Oh, great.
Because now I'd come back as a lawyer from the States and I could participate. And Zola Squier was my boss. He was the head of the ANC Constitutional.
Who did you say?
Zola Squier.
Okay.
He was the head of he was the head of the Constitutional Committee in the early negotiations. And we had this conference about electoral systems. And we're talking about what kind of electoral system to have. And South Africa used to have a constituency-based system. But it also had apartheid, which created segregation, right? Rigid racial segregation. So if you think of trying to create boundaries for constituencies, you're going to have constituencies that are racially based. And coming out of apartheid, we could not accept the idea of racially based constituencies. And so what we argued was, because of that residential segregation that had been imposed by the apartheid, you couldn't have, if you constructed constituencies so that there'd only be a small white minority in each one, it would mean the first election and there'd be no white or other minority representation at all.
I get it.
Right? The African majority was over 80%. So if it was a pure majoritarian system, all the minorities would be out. Now, they weren't giving up power. They were not going to hand over power if they didn't have some play in the system. Proportional representation enables minorities to participate. So that was the justification for going for proportional representation. And from the beginning, some of us argued there's a problem with that. Because what proportional representation does, it creates a space between the elected and the people who vote for them. Because you don't have your local MP, member of parliament, who you can go and say...
No, you don't. No.
Because you have the party people.
Yeah.
So it does strengthen parties. But in a way that...
But they can also strengthen local government, because then you're voting for the mayor. It can strengthen local government. It
can strengthen local government as long as local government actually has the resources and the capacity. One of the problems in South Africa too post-1994 is that many of the leadership that had been excluded from politics until 94, as soon as they can enter politics, all go up to regional and national, leaving the locals with very little capacity. And so one of the difficulties was, if you see where corruption and that first started developing in South Africa post-94, it's at that local level.
Do you think it's time to amend the proportional representation system?
I think in fact, the process of amendments are already underway, in the sense that the Constitutional Court has argued that they have to allow individuals to participate. They must find a way to provide greater participation for political candidates. And so what they're going to probably have to do is go more with the German system, where you have half of the assembly or half of the legislature elected by proportional representation and half elected directly.
Oh, I see. That's the German system.
That's the German system.
How is that called? Proportional representation and parliamentary democracy?
Well, it's all parliamentary democracy, but the way it works is you each have a constituency, and so half the seats in the Bundestag get filled by people who are directly elected. And then when you vote for a party and you vote for your local representative. You have two votes. So then you take the party's vote and you look, which is today in Germany, they're voting, right? And so what they do is they'll take the party vote and they'll say that other 50% will be proportionately divided so that the 100% of parliament will reflect the proportion of the parties.
Now, hold on. So if a party wins...
so the party... I win as an individual in this constituency.
Yes.
But my party doesn't win as many constituencies as we win proportionally. Then I'll get more seats on the proportional side to make sure that it's proportional as a whole.
No, I need to understand it better. So, proportional representation is usually drawn from the presidential election. So from the party, let me call it the party election. The party election, yeah, okay. Forgive me from Ghana, so I talk presidential election like that. So from the party election. So if the party, X party wins 70% of the election, under proportional representation, they will be providing 70% of the legislature.
Correct.
So in this context, they'll be providing 70% of the 50% legislature.
No. They will they will be added seats on the proportional side, so that depending on how many they won in the individual constituencies, there will be 70% overall.
Or they need to add what they won in the individual constituencies to achieve the 70%.
No, they look at the individuals and they add up, say you are the CDU, which is likely to come to power in Germany. They'll look at how many individual constituencies they won. Let's assume they win 40% overall. I don't know what they're going to win, but let's assume 40%. But they only won, say, 30% of the individuals. So then you have to give them more in the proportional side, so that overall, when you count their individual plus the proportional side of parliament, in the Bundestag, they will have 40%.
Africa's biggest challenge with democracy is accountability of the elected.
I don't think it's just in Africa. I think all over the world.
Yeah, but especially in Africa, because I'm not so sure about the strength of chieftaincy in Southern Africa, but in West Africa, chieftaincy is very significantly pronounced.
Right.
And the chieftaincy was the political system before the colonial authorities came in. The chieftaincy system operates almost like a theocracy, where the chief is sort of born as a chief.
Right.
And he rules as a benevolent dictator of sorts. And he has very little accountability to the people. But he's expected to do good to the people. He's a benevolent dictator. And that's the system that we operated. And then colonialism came. So when colonialism came, we sort of swapped the political head with the chief. And so when the Africans took over democracy at the beginning of the late 50s and the 60s, the political authority also operated like the chief of sorts. And so you have, in Africa, the political authority had been elected, they were given names, they were praised, they were given titles like chief. In Ghana, our first president, Kwame Nkrumah, was given a title to himself, Osajefo. That's a title of a big chief in the country. Other places, they were Kenneth Kaunda and co. were called all of those things. Now, coming out of the 60s and gaining independence, accountability suffered a significant deficit. And those who point to that say that the best political system to cure this accountability deficit is the parliamentary system, the British political parliamentary system. They strengthen their argument by making the point that you would observe that whereas most Africans transitioned into the British political system, all of them cut it off and chose the American presidential system because that allowed more dictatorial tendencies. So if Africa really wants to get its democracy working, it must return to the parliamentary system where an individual is elected as prime minister. He has to be in parliament to provide accountability to the people on a daily basis. Without that, any other political system for Africa at this time is just facilitating dictatorship, and it's not going to work. We have been in Ghana and for the last 30 years, and I've written a book about it I'll be sharing with you. And if you look at the book, the theory that I put out in the book, you'll see that what we are really lacking is accountability. And so the suggestion is, in Ghana, we are talking about constitutional amendments a lot these days. The suggestion is that let's take a political system that guarantees the accountability of the leader. And to do that, you have to take the Westminster system.
Now, what's interesting about that is the parliamentary system, it in some ways has greater accountability, but in other ways it doesn't, in the sense that you often have a big difference between the professional civil service and the parliamentarians. You also have moments where a prime minister can become so powerful that accountability is not that clear. Just because you have to answer questions in parliament doesn't make you accountable.
That's all we need in Africa.
So these issues are real, right? I think accountability is a real issue, and one of the ways to secure it, I mean, the reason it's worked in Britain is because you've had a long traditional common law system.
It worked in Ghana too.
But a common law system.
Ghana uses the common law system.
And a judiciary that was very, very independent.
Same here. Right? We have that here in Ghana too.
You do indeed, but at the same time, the question is, institutionally, are these institutions effectively independent? Are these institutions able to actually check one another? Because that's the key, is institutional strength and Ghana, institutional capacity.
We are very confident, and you've been looking at constitutional law, you will find that we are very confident that our judiciary has been one of the most effective in this 30 years of democracy. They have given landmark rulings against the president, against everyone. What we don't get is the president being accountable by just talking. When we want him to be accountable, we're not saying the president of Ghana must do anything. He must be compelled to explain decisions he's made. You know, because we have a Ghanaian political system where when the president is elected, he may decide that he doesn't speak to the country. He doesn't answer any question. He comes to parliament once a year to give a sessional address, but that's a monologue. He can decide to give an interview, or he may not give. He's not compelled by convention to grant a press conference at the Jubilee House every week. He doesn't have to do that. So one can be president in 1990, will say nothing except in sessional address until 1994. What we are hoping to get is that we can have a president who has necessarily to answer why he has signed this deal with South Africa, why he has signed this deal with America, why he has done, and he has to be compelled to come and explain to us why he has done this and that and that. So, for instance, right now in Ghana, there's a repetition of something that happened in 2017 where public sector workers with the new government are asked to leave. It happened in 2017, it's happening again. Now, in 2017, there was no opportunity for the president of Ghana to be in parliament to be asked, Mr. President, why are you doing this and that, so that he can talk about it. Today, it's happening again, and the president of Ghana has not commented on it. A letter has gone out of his office, same way as it did in 2017, through the chief of staff, indicating that you cannot employ these people. Again, I have to repeat that it happened in 2017, and the president has not said anything about it. And nobody can ask him anything about it. But he's the decision maker.
And there's no ability to challenge that in court?
There is.
So that's why I'm saying these other institutions, because even if you had the press conference and you asked, and the president responded and said, well, because I think it's the right thing to do.
Once he says it's the right thing to do, the president would have moved into the arena of a political question. Then he's presenting himself to the voters again, telling the voters that's the right thing to do. That will be a burden on him for the next election and a burden on his party. And that is why the president is not speaking about it.
But that's only 4 years away. And surely, just like, I mean, I've read some of the books that are coming out now in Ghana that reveal enormous amounts of difficulty in government with corruption and other issues. And so how come those aren't having the same political effect? If this evidence, information is all out there, is it that the voters aren't aware of it? They're not made aware of it?
We don't have the opportunity to find out that, Mr. President, is this really from you? Because some of his supporters will say, oh, it's a system. The letter was not signed by the president, it was signed by the chief of staff.
So if the president comes to the meeting and says, I don't know anything about it.
That's something. That's major. That means a lot. So if he comes and says, it is me, that also means a lot.
From a journalist's point of view, this means a lot.
Yes, but the general public too.
But does it have an impact constitutionally? Does it have an impact institutionally? Does it have an impact that can actually bring accountability?
Yes, it brings accountability.
I can see the public accountability.
Yeah, because it is a political question now. The president has now told us that this is his hand. Okay, if that's what he wants to do, we are clear in our minds what we're dealing with.
But if you write an editorial tomorrow saying, Mr. President, this is going on under your watch, you are president, therefore you're responsible for it unless you come and tell us that you're not.
Yes, people have said that, but he may decide not to respond for 4 years.
But then he's already made a count. I mean, then it's clear it's his problem.
No, his supporters can spin it anyway.
But so they will if he says it's good or bad or I know nothing about it. His supporters will go, oh, he's still good.
Yes, but if he says he knows nothing about it, it undermines the policy. It undermines the implementation of what is being done. If he says, I don't know anything about it. So we have had issues not just with this current government, but with other governments.
So you think just keeping quiet is enough to enable it?
Yes, just keeping quiet puts the general public in the dark because the president hasn't done anything wrong in that context. There's no process within the constitutional framework for the president to say something. So many years ago, there was a constitutional review process in Ghana. And those days, as a news reporter, I appeared before the commission and told them that why don't we introduce presidential question time to Parliament, and the president should speak under oath. So every now and then, because there's ministerial question time before Parliament, so every now and then, or maybe once a year, it's presidential question time. So we're all waiting for presidential question time in July, for instance. And then we pile up the questions to the president. He comes, Mr. President, when you took office in January, a young woman was killed the other day by your interior minister. What is your answer to that? And then the president can then engage. It is necessary for the democracy to be sustained.
But don't you have a State of the Nation speech where the president then
but that's a monologue.
And there's no question time
No, at all. Absolutely not.
Well, that's interesting because the State of the Nation in South Africa, they face questions afterwards.
Parliament would debate it.
Oh, no.
So
the president in South Africa is part of that debate, has to answer those questions.
But that's the point I'm making. The proportional representation in South Africa breaches this gap of accountability that we're worried about. Because there you have the president in parliament. And this is Jacob Zuma sitting there, and this is Julius Malema.
Only for the SONA, only for the State of the Nation speech.
But he's in parliament every now and then.
He's not there the rest of the time, no.
He comes only there.
He comes for that.
To read it.
He can be there at other times if he wishes, but he doesn't have to be.
Yes, but at least when he gives the SONA, he can take questions.
He has to take questions.
Here, when he gives the SONA, it's a document for Parliament to debate. He gives the SONA, he talks about himself, he talks about his activities, he touts his activities, his supporters will shout, yeah. And when he has finished, he says, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much, I'm gone. Yeah. He comes next year with another SONA. Yeah. And when he comes next year, you cannot ask him, Mr. President, you came last year and said you were going to reduce the cost of education. It didn't get reduced. No, he will come and say that, Mr. Speaker, we have reduced the cost of education. And then the opponent will say, how did you reduce the cost? They will be shouting. Yeah. And the Speaker will say, keep quiet, keep quiet. He will finish and he's gone. During the debate, somebody will say, the president was wrong. Yeah. But you will never get to hear from the elected president, who is elected by universal adult suffrage and who is elected 50% plus one. Yeah. You will never get to hear anything about him. You have to make a decision in the ballot box. Yeah. So the last president who left, people had issues. Yeah. He did this, he did that, he did this, that. There's absolutely no opportunity for him to appear anywhere, for you to ask him in terms of the political and constitutional process, not something he chooses, I want to do a press conference or I don't. There's no way for you to ask him, Mr. President, the other day they said you said a chief should stand up to shake your hand. What was that about? Yeah. You can't. If he submits himself to an interview, you may, but there's no constitutional process to do so. And some experts think that this lack of accountability is actually crashing the democracy, and we might be heading out of democracy in the next decade or so if we don't do something about accountability.
I agree on the accountability question. I think your focus just on whether the president answers questions is a limited conception of accountability, because I actually think you need many more institutions. You have to empower the institutions that this constitution, the Ghanaian constitution, includes many institutions that if they had greater independence would bring greater accountability. So you have other ways to bring accountability. I think it's great to question the president.
But that's a longer process.
That's a good idea.
Developing institutions is longer. It takes a while.
I know, but we've had how many years? I mean, building those institutions matters.
But we have. I mean, Ghana hasn't done badly at all in building institutions. Yeah. Media has been quite significantly strong. Except that we can do better. Yeah. You know, in terms of the in-depth of the analysis, we can do better.
This is why I found Ghana fascinating. I think
yes,
but
the
really interesting developments.
The whistleblowing aspect of media, we have achieved it significantly.
I know, I've read some of the books.
Yes, we just get more in-depth and we are there. Yeah. And then also the judiciary has been the major backbone to this institution of democracy.
Really important.
If the judiciary had not taken the decisions that they are taking, we will be in real trouble.
That's right.
So for instance, the former president fired the Auditor General at some point, in some circumstance.
Right.
The Auditor General had been appointed by the former president after he had lost the election. So it raised a few eyebrows, but that's okay. It's a constitutional mandate, so he did. Now, when the new president came in, he had difficulties with the Auditor General. Now, I found out from the government why they had difficulties with the Auditor General, and they seemed justified difficulties. But when the president fired the Auditor General, the Supreme Court took the view that he cannot do that. That if he wants the Auditor General fired, in terms of institutional democracy, he ought not to do that. He has to write to the head of civil service and tell him that, can you have a look at your Auditor General because he's doing X, Y, Z.
There's processes.
That's the Supreme Court of Ghana. And a lot of the judges who gave this ruling were appointed by that president. So the judiciary has done significantly well. In fact, without the judiciary, perhaps we may not still have the democracy that we have today.
But that's my point about institutions. That's why you need these institutions and why the institutions matter.
We have been building the democracy for 60 years. We have been building the Supreme Court as an institution for nearly 60 years.
Right.
Because in 1960...
But you've had breaks on the way.
Yes, but we have had the history. In 1960, the Supreme Court delivered a ruling against the almighty President Nkrumah. What did he do? He fired the judges.
Right.
In other constitutions, we have determined in the law that the president cannot fire judges.
Right.
In 1969, again, the Supreme Court delivered a major ruling against the Prime Minister. He didn't fire them because he couldn't. Right. Not that he was a good man, he couldn't. Because we had learned our lessons from 1960, so we fixed the constitution, so he couldn't fire them.
Right.
But he spoke against them. publicly, which was concerning. Come back to 1992, the next opportunity for democracy. No, actually 79, the next opportunity for democracy. Again, the Supreme Court delivered a major ruling against the government. And then in 1992, when we started January 93, by December 90, all of this is recorded in my book. By December 93, the Supreme Court again delivered a major ruling against the government. And then come back to 2000 when the new government came, John Agyekum Kufuor. 2002, the Supreme Court delivered a major ruling against the government. So that Supreme Court strength has been built from 1960. If we want to build other institutions, do we need since 1960 to build it? Are we going to end in 2075? Is the democracy going to sustain itself waiting for 75 for institutions to be built?
It's a continuing process. As you've just described for the judiciary, building an institution doesn't happen from one day to the next.
At all.
But it also doesn't take 75 years. It builds along the way. And so what you're going to see, if you look at the constitutional structure here that allows independent institutions, the human rights institution and others, they are building over time. And hopefully the government enables them to continue to get stronger over time. And that's how you build an institutional system. What's the difficulty is you get attacks on these every now and again that often hold things back.
It's also exciting if you look at the brighter side of Africa's democracy, that the book has just been written and published by General Ibrahim Babangida of Nigeria. And he's regretting the events of June 12th, I believe it was 1995 or 96. This is the abolition of the abortment of the election that was clearly won by Moshood Abiola. And Babangida is regretting changing that electoral process. And that's encouraging. But we have had to wait until Babangida is 80 years old before he tells us this. We don't know whether we should say we are lucky or because anything could have happened. Because there are people in Nigeria who made the point that Abiola won the election and the election was taken away. And now, several years later, 30 years later, Babangida comes to say, yes, I regret. He doesn't quite say that he did anything, but he says, I regret the processes that occurred then that brought Ensonikan to power, because that's what really destroyed Nigeria. That process then brought Abacha, and Abacha was really the bad thing. So perhaps we are not doing that badly as a democracy in Africa. But looking at what is happening in Burkina Faso, looking at what is happening in Niger and in Mali, and the difficulties of stability in Libya and Algeria and Tunisia, and the Togolese situation where you have one president being there for a long time. In Ivory Coast, the Ouattara is on a third term, and Senegal is looking good. It just had a young leader elected. There are still hodgepodges of threats to democracy across and around Africa.
Mozambique
is going on. Congo is all over the place.
Congo is a terrible war.
Why we are worried is that during the inauguration of the Ghanaian president, the guest that got the biggest cheer was Ibrahim Traore, the Burkinabe leader of the illegal military junta. And everyone was worried. Why are Ghanaians cheering Ibrahim Traore? So what do you think? How do we sustain democracy in Africa? Should we quickly get to constitutional amendments and amend in such a way that it fits the society so South Africa knows its problem? They should design a constitution that fixes it. Can we fix our problems through the constitutional system?
I would hope that we can fix it through the constitutional system, but I think that the constitutional system only functions when the people that inhabit that system, both the politicians and the judges and the police and all the institutions, actually commit themselves to that system. Because when they are undermining that system, you can see why people lose faith in the system. You can see why people think there's a shortcut. Let's get a strong person who promises us the world and we'll go with them, because maybe that will get us what we want. That's where I think the real threat is that if we don't show the obvious commitment, when the people look around and say, no, these people are just helping themselves. They're not actually fulfilling the promises of the system as it's given to us. That's where the danger is if the system is allowed to function. It's not having to be amended. It's let's make it work. I think that's the key. I mean, what we've seen is, again, the scandals that you talk about, that are written about by journalists, those are scandals that the system has not coped with. The system has not addressed those scandals. That's what the people look at and say, well, if the law doesn't apply to them, why should it apply to me? The law has to apply to everybody equally. Right? That's the rule of law. That's essential to the constitutional system functioning. If you don't follow the rules, if everybody doesn't get to be under the same rule, then nobody does.
What will be your last word on this conversation? What would you have to say at the end of the conversation? What's your last word?
Well, my last word is that, I'm in Ghana for 10 months. And I found it, firstly, incredibly welcome society, welcoming. I found it a fascinating place to be. I was born in the same year that Ghana got independence. And so for me, I'm very proud of this as the first independent state in Africa. But I'm also finding that it's very challenging in the sense that the levels of inequality. I meet so many young people who are well educated, cannot find a job. I mean, there is the difficulty where the private sector needs to embrace. It needs to ensure that people can get employed, that this talent that is here can be engaged and used, because then the society has real potential and a future. Too many young people say, I can't get a job, I'm educated, how do I get to some other country? That is sad. That I find challenging. That what we really need is a commitment to the country, but the country also has to give in terms of the capacity here. We cannot sustain the levels of inequality in Africa or anywhere in the world that are such that the vast majority don't feel that they have a future.
Do you get that in South Africa? Do South African youth want to travel to America and to UK and Holland and Germany? South African youth want to travel?
Because they don't feel they have the opportunity. That's increasingly the case. And that's a problem. And that's the problem again of that inequality.
Do you get that with German youth? They want to go to America or they want to be in Germany?
No. So that's the difference, right?
They want to be in Germany?
They're happy to be in Germany.
UK youth want to be in UK?
Exactly.
Japan youth want to be in Japan? South Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, Mozambique, they want to
be elsewhere. Yeah.
Even when they have a lot of gold resources?
Yes,
minerals.
But those gold resources are not being given to the country or shared with the country. What's happening to those gold resources?
That's what I'm saying. That can't we put it in the Constitution? The Constitution in Ghana has a chapter on managing resources.
Yes.
But can't we put in the Constitution that under this Constitution, never would we have a mining agreement that has 70% this, or all mining agreements must have this agreement, 35%, 40%, 55% for Ghana.
So what's interesting about your argument is what you're suggesting is the Constitution should have increasing detail.
Yes.
Right? But the problem is if you can't abide by the rules as they are, adding more detail doesn't help you.
I see what you mean.
Because the principle, as you say, is already there in the Constitution that these resources should be managed for the people of the country.
Effectively, but it doesn't say
legislation, and legislation should enforce that. And then the executive authority should enforce that legislation. So the Constitution provides the base, the opportunity, and the parameters in which the legislature should now write the laws that provide those specifics. Should say, yes, if we have an agreement, if we're going to enter into an agreement, this has to be what has to be delivered to the country or reinvested in the country or to provide employment or whatever. And then the executive has to be committed to implementing that. And if you see examples where that is not happening, adding more detail to the Constitution doesn't fix it. It's the fact that the Constitution is the law, but the rule of law doesn't function without people.
Do you want to run for office someday?
No.
At all?
I'm a professor.
Yeah, we've had a conversation in Ghana recently where one of my friends who was a professor at Legon has been appointed by the president, two of them actually.
Yeah.
He's raised a conversation about, is that what we're going to be doing, taking our academics into politics and into government service? What do you think about that? There are those who think that, look, he's a professor. He has a lot to add to where he's going. And so let the president do that. But if we continue doing that, we will be wiping the university of all our professors.
No, I think you'd get more professors. I think that if somebody has the capacity and the executive or the political branches think that they would be useful, if they will go there and use that capacity for the country's benefit, then that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. And at the end of their term, I hope they will return to the university.
Oh, they actually don't leave the university. They don't leave. They just get secondment. Yes, they don't leave the university.
There's nothing wrong with secondment. No, I mean, as long as they then are able to fulfill exactly, if they are used as paper to look like it's out there and the politicians continue to do something different, that doesn't help.
Okay, let me surprise you.
And I hope they have the integrity to say, I'm going back to the university, thank you.
I'm sure they would. Let me ask you a final question that will surprise you. Why hasn't the Bafana won the African Cup of Nations since 1996?
Now, that's a good question. And it's a very sad one because I wish they had.
Thank you,
That's
Prof.
my party.
Never mind. Ghana has not won it since 1982.
I know. This is so sad because the Black Stars were such a fantastic team in the early years.
They were. Thank you, Prof. It's always a pleasure.
Really good to meet you.
And thank you. Welcome again to Ghana.
Thank you very much.
That was Professor Hines. Yes. Okay. Let me give you the book. Okay. So let's do that. Let's go on. Prof, so this is my book. It's called Africa's New Constitutional Leadership, 77 Stories That Defined Ghana's Fourth Republic.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much.
I'm going to give you a copy. Thanks, Prof. Yeah.
I really look forward to reading it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Because what I'm doing here in this Fulbright is learning about Ghana and loving it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Indeed.
Excellent. Okay. So that was our conversation with Prof. Thank you.
Metro TV, insightful and inspiring moments.
Has Christianity always been one of the religions in the world to you?
No, 1,000 times no. Jesus the Christ did not come to start a new religion, but to impart the life of God to humans to regenerate them into